Let's go.
Get your copy of Fire. It's definitely a must-read. If you enjoy hood books, this one is it. Just like the title of the book, it's officially Fire. Get it on Amazon, paperback or Kindle.
The once goal-driven, ambitious Sapphire turns to the street life after the sudden death of her big brother Dre. Dre's best friend Devontae tries to honor his homeboy's last request of looking out for his baby sister. A rebellious Sapphire makes it very difficult for Devontae to carry out his promise.
Peace. This is the enemy's public. I am your Bro.Nasir. I want to thank everyone for joining me this evening. My brother Big Dog Philly OG, salute. Respect to my sister, the true daughter of darkness. Salute to my brother Ghetto Child Clinic. Salute to my brother P. Moses. Thank you for tapping in this evening. And to those who didn't make a comment yet, thank you for tapping in. Now, I want to speak about a young brother, 21 years old, from the Chicago area that traveled down to Henderson, North Carolina. Salute, respect to my sister, Black Panther Jackie Brown. Thanks for tapping in. The young brother traveled down to Henderson, North Carolina. He was a truck driver. And he was found hanged in Henderson, North Carolina. Before any investigation was conducted, the sheriff said there was no lynching. And his reasons I'll get into later on of why he ruled a lynching out. This is just another reason why when people come to us telling us that we should vote, we should go out and vote for whatever reason, while those of us who participate in the United States politics, we have many unsolved problems that presidential candidates have yet to address. Peace to my brother Hawkeye. Thanks for tapping in. The George Floyd Act that will hold police accountable when they violate our rights or they violently aggress us and outright kill us at traffic stops and in our homes. That's the George Floyd Act. While the ignorant among us put the cape on for a politician, left or right, jackass or elephant. Salute to my brother, Epic Studies. I don't put the cape on for no politician, left or right, jackass or elephant. Then these people try to convince us that we should endorse a candidate while neither candidate feels compelled to address issues that affect us. One candidate don't care and the other candidate could care less. Meanwhile, those of us who just don't trust American politics for a very good reason are called names and are told that we must choose an oppressor. They're trying to tell us we got to choose an oppressor in order to get something out of this system that has never done anything for us, that has failed us several times over. The money that comes in and out of our communities in a matter of hours is equivalent to a sovereign nation, an independent nation at that. Salute my brother Warfare K, my Jersey brethren. Salute to you. Again, the money that comes in and out our communities is equivalent to a sovereign nation, an independent nation. Yet we'll rather put our trust in a politician than to pool our resources and change our condition independently. You know, we really never failed at what we attempted to do as a people. We never really failed at that. We put our minds to it and we did it. It's just after we had to go to war to sustain and maintain what we've established, it makes some of us reluctant to do anything independent outside our open and consistent enemy. In 2024, brothers and sisters, 2024, our people are rallying behind and behalf of politicians. Some of us, the ignorant among us, are saying unless we vote, we can't talk about the problems we have. They're telling us the solution to our problems are really the root of our problems, a system that works against us. Then the ones who are telling us this foolishness are puppets, and they are far removed from us. That's the problem I have with someone who think they have risen above the condition of our people. In 2024, while some of us are rallying in support of politicians, our people are literally being lynched. I know what the police are telling us, yet that is always what they tell us when one of us are found strung up, hanging from a noose. They rule it a suicide. They've been ruling lynches as suicides since the Jim Crow era. Peace to my brother, my comrade, Talk Your Talk Media, Greedy Vegan. Thanks for tapping in. Again, they've been ruling lynchings as suicide since the Jim Crow era. There are so many unsolved crimes against humanity where we are the victims. That's what we should be suing the United States for. Peace to my brother Drake House Music. We should be suing the United States for crimes against humanity of what happened in my lifetime that I've seen we can sue the United States for. Crimes against humanity. We damn sure got them. We got the evidence when it comes to that. There's publications showing lynches, books with pictures called Without Sanctuary, newspaper clippings. The police have committed crimes and put it on our children. They have committed crimes and put it on teenage brother, i.e., a young brother. This was 70 plus years ago. The police committed crimes and they put it on George Stinney when he was tried, convicted, and executed the same day. They tried the young brother, found him guilty, sentenced him to death, and then carried out the sentence in the same day. George Stinney was a 14-year-old child who was executed in a proceeding later vacated as an unfair trial for the murders of two young white girls in March of 1944 in Alcala, South Carolina. 11-year-old and an 8-year-old girl was killed. And they want us to believe that a little boy was able to kill two girls and then carry them over to a lake and dump them in a lake. Again, he was convicted, sentenced to death, and executed by electric chair in June of 1944, and he became the youngest person to be executed in the United States. Of course, it would be one of us, at least in the 20th century. A re-examination of Stenny's death began in 2004, 70 years later. And several individuals and the Northeastern University School of Law sought a judicial review of Stenny's murder conviction, and it was vacated 70 years later. What good is it to vacate a sentence after you executed the person falsely, unjustly? What good is it to vacate that sentence after the killers, the real killers died? That's what they always do. They'll find some new evidence after the real killers, the real perpetrators of the crime die. Then they'll miraculously find the real killers. Now, the young brother, Javion Magee, is the latest victim of such horrific crimes against humanity in Henderson, North Carolina. Yet the sheriff said that it's not a lynching. Javion, again, was a 21-year-old truck driver from Chicago area. He was found dead in a rural area of Vanco Mill Road. This was last Wednesday. Investigators said he was not far from his truck. He was leaning with his back up against a tree and a rope around his neck. Now, Magee was in Henderson because he was driving for Walmart, and he was making a delivery to the Walmart distribution center. Now, the sheriff want us to believe that he did this to himself. Now, driving from Illinois to North Carolina with a load of goods to commit suicide makes no sense to me. Now, that's really insulting to us to even suggest that this brother did this to himself. And he tried to say because the sheriff said because there was no noose. No noose. Now, the rope was around his neck, but the fact that it wasn't no noose, he ruled it he didn't say it was a suicide, but they said it's not a lynching because there was no noose. I wonder how this man became the sheriff if he does investigations like that. Now, this has been going on since the police inception. The truth is not in them, so the truth is not going to come out them. And they want us to trust them and be seen as the good guys when that's far from the truth. Now, the sheriff is automatically ruling out homicide or lynching. The fact that he was found with a rope around his neck and a rope was tied to a tree, to me, that sounds like a lynching. The sheriff said there was no knot, therefore it was not a lynching. Now, that makes no sense because there was no noose. He says that it wasn't a lynching because there was no noose. And while this is going on, we have people telling us that we should be focused on politics. Salute my brother Black Wild India, my brother Prophet Levi. Salute to you. Thanks for tapping in. while some of us are focused on politics and trying to get the rest of us to focus on politics. That's like the trick bag. I've always said, in a fight, and we are in a fight, we've been aggressed and on many levels. Watch both hands when you're in a fight. Watch the knees, the elbows, watch everything. Watch the flexing of the shoulders when you're in a fight. But they think that they could wind the backhand and hit us with the front hand, and we don't see that coming. That's how they try and trick us. Now, and they'll put people in front of us who are entertainers to try to get us to vote for them and vote against our own interest. And they'll try to control us through who they think can influence us. And that is insulting to even think that an entertainer can influence us with our everyday lives. Now, when some of our people get money, they think that they've done everything right when they haven't, knowing that they made deals to get to where they are financially. Then once they arrive financially, they think that they're above reproach and infallible. Then the self-righteousness shows its ugly face. These Negroes who make wicked deals with evil people will even say, God did it for them. Then they'll behave like they've risen above our condition. Our conditions are not theirs anymore because they got money. Until they get their wake-up call, then they want to come back to us and rally us to support them when something happened to them. They want us to report to support them. The entertainers would rather attempt to make it easy for a politician by, as Steve Harvey say, throwing them an alley oop instead of asking the real questions. What are you going to do on behalf of our people? Instead of the important questions that that directly affect us, but instead the people have to watch a washed up, non-funny so-called comedian and a deceptive politician bullshit us right in our face. Meanwhile, lynchings are occurring in North Carolina. Police are killing our people at traffic stops and in our homes. This is why I'll never allow an entertainer to serve outside their capacity and tell me nothing about what I'm supposed to be doing with myself. I would never do that. Now I have a video presentation that deals with this subject matter. You know, Biden signed a bill 2 years ago making lynchings a federal hate crime. He signed that bill, but Biden is deceptive. He's deceptive as law enforcement. He's deceptive as legislators. They're all deceptive. Just because he signed a bill, it doesn't mean that the lynches will stop. And it don't mean racist ass cops will cover up what happened. It may be a bill signed, but what's crazy about that, there was real specific about the bill they signed when it came to the Asians. There was real specific. Asian hate crime bill. But when it comes to us, they put a big umbrella over it and say that lynching is a federal hate crime. But what about a bill specifically for our people? There's no bill specifically for our people. This is why my sentiment is that we need to form militias and protect our own selves. We need to be on our streets. Whatever we don't want in our community, We drive it out wherever we want in our community. We bring it to our communities, and we don't care who is charged with patrolling our cities. We tell them we don't need them because they're not doing a damn thing anyway. Speaking about the police, we don't need them because they don't have a genuine concern for our people in our community. So we don't need them. We need to take to our own streets and secure and make our own streets safe because the police is not doing that. As a matter of fact, if a police car drives by and people cringe, the police is the problem. We don't feel safe when the police drive by. We get tense when the police drive by. But if you see a friendly, a brother, and he got your back, he's patrolling the streets and he's assuring your safety, that's what we need. We don't need somebody we don't know in our community telling us that we're safe because of them. We don't. I'm going to share my screen and show the video presentation.
From the west suburbs was found dead in North Carolina.
Javion Magee was just 21. We have to warn you, some of the details might be hard to hear this afternoon. Police say he was discovered not far from his truck in the city of Henderson Wednesday, leaning against a tree with a rope around his neck. His family suspects foul play, but police say it wasn't a lynching. Initially, the family says the Vance County Sheriff's Office told them Magee died by suicide. But today, the sheriff's written statement doesn't list his death as a suicide. And said,
what's crazy about this is when I first clicked on this video, it had a disclaimer, and it said self-harm. So they're already saying that it's a suicide with the disclaimer, with no investigation, no cause of death ruled, but they're already saying and making a disclaimer that this young man harmed himself, which I don't believe.
says they're now investigating his death. Javion's family wants the FBI to step in.
I just feel something in my bones that's not right, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Candace Matthews is speaking for Magee's mother and says the family wants transparency. His death captured attention this week when his cousin posted a TikTok accusing law enforcement of dragging their feet in the investigation. Family has traveled to North Carolina to press investigators for more information because police are saying Magee purchased the rope at a Walmart before he died. The family
Now, just because the young brother purchased a rope at Walmart, it doesn't mean that he did this to himself. It don't mean that. And that is amateur-like investigation. To even say that, to even put that out there like that is deceptive and disingenuous, because perhaps this young brother who really don't got no size on him is seen purchasing the rope, and someone followed him and used his own rope to lynch him. Why isn't that in the equation? Because he bought rope, it's not ruled a lynching, or lynching is ruled out. It makes no sense.
The spokesperson saying the timeline isn't adding up.
This family deserves answers, and you are going to do your job, because something happened between that Walmart distribution center and that young man being hung from a tree.
I think that somebody followed him. Henderson, North Carolina, I don't know who predominantly lived there, but I think somebody followed him and did this to him. I don't think he did this to himself.
There's an issue. Now, Javion, also the parents want to know, has had no history of mental health, has no criminal history. You know, Javion was a happy individual. In fact, he was happy to even have his CDL license that he just not that long got.
Magee's body is now with the medical examiner for an autopsy. The sheriff's office says they'll share the results with the family as soon as they come in and before they make that report public.
Now we're going to go to the history of lynching in the United States. Now it's a study.
Show with a new report.
It's a study finds 4,000 lynchings in the Jim Crow South. Will the U.S. address the legacy of racial terrorism? And see how they put this out? They're asking the question, will the U.S. address the legacy of racial terrorism? And this is evidence also how we can prosecute our case of crimes against humanity when we were the victims.
Report on the history of lynchings in the United States and their legacy today. After 5 years of exhaustive research and interviews with local historians and descendants of lynching victims, the Equal Justice Initiative found white Southerners lynched nearly 4,000 Black men and women and children between 1877 and 1950. Nearly 700 of those lynchings were previously unaccounted for. The report details a 1916 attack in which a mob lynched Jeff Brown for accidentally bumping into a white girl as he ran to catch a train. And an example from 1940, a crowd lynched Jesse Thornton for not addressing a white police officer as Mr. In many cases, the lynchings were attended by the entire white community in an area.
Well, for more, we go to Alabama, one of the 12 southern states profiled in the study, where we're joined by Brian Stevenson, attorney who's worked on death penalty cases in the Deep South since 1985 and the founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative. The report published Tuesday is titled Lynching in America, Confronting the Legacy of Racial Terror. They're now calling for the placement of historical markers at sites where lynchings occurred. Brian Stevenson joins us from Montgomery, Alabama. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Brian. There's a whole discussion again about states' rights. In a moment, we're going to talk to one of the first couples who just got married in Alabama. How does that relate to this horrific study that has been done, or a study about the horrific history of lynching?
Well, it relates very directly. I mean, you're absolutely right that this rhetoric of states' rights was precisely what local states asserted when the federal government began asking questions about why these lynchings were being tolerated. And in many ways, it is that dynamic that set up this era of terrorism. I mean, at the end of the Civil War, you had people who were reclaiming power from freed Black people. It's really at the beginning of the end of Reconstruction that we see violence and threats and intimidation beginning to assert itself to society.
When our people started asserting ourselves and doing what we needed to do as a people, you know, like building our own cities, founding our own cities, and just building our communities up. These people got jealous of what we were doing. We were prospering on all levels. That's why I say everything we attempted to do as a people, we have done. And despite the hindrance of our enemies, we still did it. And then any and every reason that they can find to tear down what we build, they've used. And most of the time, most case scenario, it was their woman, in which we really didn't pay attention to. Really didn't pay attention to their women. Their women came on to us. We didn't pay attention to their women, but they were always used as a reason to do something to us.
Sustain racial hierarchy. White supremacy wouldn't succeed if it wasn't enforced with violence and threat and terror. And at the very beginning, African Americans were asking the federal government to intervene. They didn't. And the states' rights mindset really took shape during this era. when thousands of African Americans were being lynched and menaced and threatened and terrorized with no protection and with tolerance from both state and federal officials.
It was unwritten law, these things that took place in the 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way up into the 70s. It was unwritten law what they were doing. You know, like the seating situation on buses. It was unwritten law. Even when laws changed, they wasn't implemented. The police and the government have always been crooked, rogue, and wicked. If you look and you see who breaks the laws mostly, it'll be legislatures. All you have to do is go into the records of those lawmakers and see how crooked they are. They break more laws than the people who they write the laws for. They break the laws. The legislators, the senators, the congressmen. Most of the things that they do is deplorable. You can't even mention some of the things they do. They have islands where they go to and do their dirt with. And again, they always do the dirt with you if you're going to do the dirt. They have the dirt on you because they was there doing it with you. They do the dirt with you to get the dirt on you.
Well, Brian Stevenson, your report also indicates considerable difference in terms of the intensity of lynching from not only from state to state, but from particular counties. Could you talk about that as well?
Sure. I mean, lynching became a really social phenomenon. It became quite intoxicating when people got this power to just abduct folks and to torture them and engage in this carnival-like atmosphere. They became, for want of a better word, bloodthirsty. And you see some of these counties where you have a lynching and then that's followed by 2 or 3 more in a very short period of time. And what was so traumatizing to people of color is that all people of color were the intended targets and victims of these lynchings. This was not an act assigned to someone for committing a crime. As you've described, oftentimes people were being lynched for no criminal accusation at all. In Blakely, Georgia, an African-American man, William Little, came home from World War I wearing his uniform, and people were offended, annoyed that he had on this American uniform, and he was lynched because he refused to take it off. A black man running to catch a train bumps into a white girl. He's lynched for that incident. This violence, this terror, was really aimed at sustaining racial hierarchy, keeping.
Can you imagine the brother, what was his name? What was the brother name in California? I think it was Christopher Joyner. He was in the military. He came home from the military. They trained him to be a killer. Christopher Dorner, that's his name, Christopher Dorner. He came home from the military. They trained him to be a killer. He came home, became LAPD. He joined the police department because he wanted to make a difference, not because he wanted to mistreat people and beat people. He reported his partner because his partner was, using excessive force on a brother. So he reported his partner. The department ostracized him. He ended up being fired, turned everybody against him. And subsequently, Christopher Joyner snapped after all he did, thinking he could fit in, thinking he could be a part of the clique. He snapped. And he started going around shooting LAPD, killing LAPD. Because after all he did, he wanted to be a cop and make a difference in his community. And because he reported his partner for using excessive force on a brother, they did all that to him. Ruined his life. So the brother went off. This was a few years ago. The brother went off and started taking out cops. After all he did, this is what they'll do. So when we think that when we want nearness to our enemy, all that is giving them an opportunity to do you wrong. And you're being close enough for them to do you wrong. So wanting nearness to our enemy is not good. And to those who tell us we don't got an enemy, that's an enemy. That is an enemy. And we got to keep people, we got to keep whores away from us. Anybody that would tell us that they'll vote for somebody because he's giving out stimulus checks is a whore. If that's the reason why you would sell your virtue and the virtue of your brothers and sisters for a few measly $1,000, you're a whore and you should not be among us. We should drive your ass away. We shouldn't even allow you to come around us talking like that. Anybody who will vote for any politician because they're giving out little measly stimulus checks because you don't want to make things happen for yourself, you'll depend on a politician and you will sell yourself that cheap, you're a cheap whore.
Being Black people in their place. And in many ways, it was quite intoxicating. You could see whole communities getting involved in these acts of violence and really being quite grotesque about the way they carried them out.
You talk about the terror, lynchings, terrorism. I want to turn to President Obama speaking at the annual National Prayer Breakfast last week. After he condemned the Islamic State as a death cult, he made this comment.
Humanity's been grappling with these questions throughout human history. And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ.
Obama, the face of abomination, Obama.
In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ. So this is not unique to one group or one religion. There is a tendency in us, a sinful tendency that can pervert and distort our faith.
That was President Obama speaking at the annual National Prayer.
And that is a true statement. And that is the order of the day in how, in which the United States government operate. Everything they say, one nation under God, indivisible, they use a lot of words like liberty, justice, tranquility. They use all these noble words. They put them on their flags and, in their pledges. And they don't mean them. If you ask the average, brother who got his head on right, do he believe in the Pledge of Allegiance? Do he believe in the Star-Spangled Banner? He'll tell you hell no.
Prayer breakfast. He's very much caused a great deal of controversy with these comments. Brian Stevenson, if you could respond.
Well, I think the president's quite right to acknowledge this history. I mean, we have never really talked about all of this destructive violence. I mean, these public spectacle lynchings that we document in our report are horrific. 10,000 people showed up in Paris, Texas, in a carnival-like atmosphere to watch a man be tortured. Some of these executions, we have one in Dyersburg, Tennessee, where the man had his eyes gouged out. He was burned, he was mutilated, and thousands of people witnessed this. And it does speak to a very dark era in our history. And we make a mistake in this country when we don't talk honestly and soberly about these experiences. I mean, the whole North and West is populated with African Americans who fled to Detroit and Chicago and Cleveland and Los Angeles, not as people looking for opportunities, but as refugees from terror. And this narrative of racial difference, which was born in this era, that has created a presumption of guilt and dangerousness that too many young people of color are burdened with, is something that we haven't adequately addressed because we haven't talked about these issues. And so I think the president is quite right to remind us of this history. We didn't have truth and reconciliation in this country.
I don't know if I believe all of this because I don't see our people as a people who just be victims and don't fight back. I've never known our people to be people that didn't fight back. We need to get other statistics on, the revolts and the ass whippings we laid out on those who aggressed us.
And because of it, I think we remain haunted, even contaminated by the disarray, the disruption that these acts of violence have created in our national psyche, but also in our relations with one another.
Because I see it like this. They do it the same way they do it today. Our enemy, they will catch you by yourself. And they would do more than double team you because most case scenario, one of us can take two of them. So they got to be 4, 5, and 6 of them to take one of us. And that's how they've always done it. It wasn't like, okay, 6 brothers against 6 them and they matched us. That ain't going down, and everybody know that. So they had to be sneaky, hiding up in trees and catching you by yourself and doing it like that. But as far as like it being an even fight and we lost, not going down, never would.
I think it's absolutely appropriate to be talking about these eras.
And Brian Stevenson, while your report concentrated on the southern states, and obviously lynching was most intensely practiced against the African American community, it was also widely practiced against in the old Mexican territories that were the United States, like Texas and New Mexico, Arizona. I've seen one report where as many as 600 Mexicans were lynched between 1848 and 1928 in the Southwest. I'm wondering if it's particularly in Texas, which you studied, you came across so many of those incidents as well.
Yes, we absolutely did. And you're absolutely right. In our full report, we actually talk about the lynchings of Mexicans and Mexican Americans. And they had many of the features that are evident in the lynchings of African Americans. They weren't being lynched for accusations of crime necessarily. There were Mexicans that were lynched for speaking Spanish in settings where people didn't want to hear Spanish. People were lynched for celebrating Mexican holidays. And you're absolutely right. In the border states in particular, this phenomena of lynching directed at Mexicans and Mexican Americans was a very real threat. And so this idea that racial difference can make you a target of violence and terrorism is something that we've been dealing with for a very long time. And I think we just haven't really talked about it. And one of the things we want to do by erecting these markers and monuments is to get...
They don't want to talk about it because that conversation will bring out the truth and they will be held accountable. They'll never talk about it because that will reveal a whole lot. And then all we'll need to do is get our lawyers together and then we can sue them for crimes of humanity against humanity. They don't want to talk about that. They say it's an uncomfortable conversation. No, they don't want to admit their guilt because they'll be held accountable. We got to hold them accountable regardless, if you know what I mean.
Get communities to begin to reflect more soberly on what this history represents. You go to Germany now and you are forced to deal with the legacy of the Holocaust because there are markers and monuments everywhere. We do the opposite in this country. We celebrate the things, in my judgment, that we probably shouldn't be celebrating. In all of these states, you find Confederate memorials and monuments everywhere dedicated to the people who were defending slavery, trying to preserve slavery, and yet nothing about the pain and anguish and suffering and injustice that those institutions created.
Tell us the story, Brian Stevenson, of Jesse Thornton and Thomas Miles and others.
Yeah, Jesse Thornton was an African-American man in Laverne, Alabama. And in 1940, which is really toward the end of the lynching era, he addressed a police officer by his name. He didn't use the title Mr. And that was considered such a violation of the racial norms and values that the officer organized a mob and they lynched him. There were people who were lynched for going up to the front door. A man in Aberdeen, Mississippi knocked on someone's door in the front, and then he was chased and ultimately lynched because he didn't go to the back of the door, which is where people of color were expected to go. And about 20% of these 4,000 lynchings were lynchings for basically social transgressions. Many African-American men were lynched because they had notes or letters to young white women. And oftentimes, people would be lynched for accusations of rape or murder, when 2 or 3 days later, the alleged murder victim would show up in town saying, no, I was just gone for 2 or 3 days. Or the rape victim would say, I was never the victim of a sexual assault. And this hysteria was deeply, deeply disruptive to people of color. One of the things that we discovered that I was particularly moved by were people who told us that they sent thousands of people away, their relatives, their friends, because they'd have an encounter with somebody in town and they thought the encounter might have been misinterpreted and they feared the mob might show up. And so they would send their dad or their child or their sister or their sibling to the north because they feared what they called a near lynching. And
I'm going to move on from this video. I have more videos to present. I have a video where a brother was almost lynched and they was filming it. One.
My grandfather and my grandmother may have spoke to, their children about it or something, or, heard other people talk about it in the family. And I think that's how she got the information. I'd actually like to find the place that he was hung and have a plaque there. And I'd like for it to be recognized. I think that he deserved it.
Sitting along the border of Tennessee and Virginia, the town of Bristol was incorporated in 1856, just 5 years before the U.S. Civil War. By the mid-1890s, the two towns had grown to over 6,000 residents. The city boasted 2 railroad lines and acted as a regional hub for transportation and trade. Bristol's racially segregated downtown contained a vibrant Black business district dubbed Black Bottom. In his 1954 book, The Negro in American Life and Thought, this period of time was classified by historian Rayford Logan as the nadir of American race relations. Logan tried to determine the year when the Negro's status in American society was at its lowest point. On Sunday, June 7, 1891, around 3 a.m., an intoxicated man entered the home of a respectable white lady, 31-year-old Mary Johnson Warren. Allegedly, he sexually assaulted her. Mary's husband, John Warren, worked at night for the Norfolk and Western Railroad, leaving her home alone every other week. It was reported that the assailant entered her home in their socks. They extinguished her lamp and threatened Mrs. Warren with death. According to newspaper reports, the police surveilled the 20-year-old Robert Clark for the next 3 days.
That sounds like something a white man would do. Sexually assault someone and threaten them with death. That don't sound like something a brother would do.
He was placed under arrest at the home of his girlfriend, where he was found sleeping. Born around 1871, Robert Clark had various attributes assigned to him: a handyman, desperado, very bad character, Negro, a young mulatto, colored boy, and a rapist. He was a convict who had spent time in the Tennessee and Virginia penitentiaries.
Thanks for tapping in, David M. Salute to you. Peace and power.
Though we've been unable to verify those claims of criminality, most of the story that follows is not in dispute. On Friday, June 12th, a preliminary trial was held, officiated by Bristol, Virginia Mayor William A. Rader. Trial attorneys included a Mr. Hamilton for the prosecution and Mr. Paul for the defense. Lewis Henderson, a black man living on the Tennessee side of Bristol, testified that at about 4 a.m., Robert Clark passed his home and was drunk. Several witnesses, black and white, also testified seeing the inebriated Clark out that night and of hearing him.
Again, I always say they couldn't have done anything they've ever done. Our enemy couldn't have done anything they've ever done without the help of some of us. All the way up to today, they could never do what they do to us without the help of some of us. We must rid ourselves of these William O'Neill type Negroes. We got to rid ourselves of them. It's coming soon. We got to rid ourselves of these Negroes that'll sell us out for a little bit of nothing.
Him boast about what he had done. Acquaintances of the accused reportedly told police during their investigation damaging information. There were no witnesses in support of his defense, leaving the wholly circumstantial evidence against him to remain. Early the next day, on Saturday, June 13th, a crowd of all colors, ages, and races began to gather outside of the jailhouse. Before noon, people from the town of Bristol, as well as the surrounding countryside, were milling about with talk of lynching. Local lawyers and prominent men made loud and long pleas for the crowd to disperse and let the law take its course. In a contradictory report from the Johnson City Comet, Mr. Warren went to the courthouse at the close of the trial with a rope in hand and was restrained. While this was happening outside of the jailhouse, a Bristol news reporter was interviewing Robert Clark in his cell. From his report, the prisoner was completely calm about the situation and proclaimed his complete innocence and ignorance of the crime he was accused of. At some point, a rumor began circulating that the jailer was attempting to sneak Clark out of the back door of the jail. At 12:30 p.m., someone in the crowd proclaimed, if it had been the wife of one of the lawyers, they would say go. But as it was only the wife of a poor working man, it is all right. Reportedly, this reply set the spark for what was to come.
And that's what they used to do when they wanted to lynch. When they wanted to lynch someone, the police will have the person in custody, and the lynch mob will come into the police headquarters, and the police will allow them to take the prisoner out to string him or her up. They will allow it. They won't even stop them from going into the police headquarters and snatching up the prisoner to take and lynch.
Someone in the mob obtained an axe and urged the others to follow him. The front door to the jail facing Lee Street was broken down, and members of the mob surged into the building. The crowd of almost 2,000 stormed the Bristol, Virginia jailhouse, broke down the doors, and abducted Robert Clark from his cell. Someone appeared shouting, "I have him, let him out." 3 or 4 men brought Clark out into the street. Shouts, cheers, hurrahs, and hats in the air accompanied the mob's acquisition of the accused. Soon, the crowd grew to over 3,000. The party acted more like a victorious team than a group of men and boys who only a few hours before had been quiet, respectable citizens of the community. By the maskless mob, Clark was taken northwest, up Lee Street, passing porch-filled houses. Some residents yelled their condemnations at the mob, to no avail. Traveling up Mary Street, the scene of the original crime, 1 mile out of Bristol to the suburbs, to a place called Lindsay Grove, near the eastern edge of Sullins College. There, the mob stopped a wagon and commandeered a trace chain from the gearing of a horse. The chain was placed around the victim's neck. At some point in the ruckus, a single person demanded that Robert Clark be allowed to make a statement.
Now, speaking of chain, this happened in modern day time. I know, everyone in the chat can remember what happened in Jasper, Texas to James Byrd. James Byrd went out drinking with a few Caucasian guys. And when they got drunk, they beat him up, tied him to a truck by chains by his feet, and dragged him for over 3 miles in the back of a truck. Tied him to the back of the truck by his feet and dragged him 3 miles until his body was torn apart. And this happened in the late 90s, not 1890, 1990. Almost the year 2000. In the 1990s, this happened.
A calm voice, he declared once again his innocence. Clark stated that the first he had heard of the crime was when he was arrested. He admitted being drunk that night of Miss Warren's assault, so drunk that he went out on the town without his shoes on. As far as those who testified against him, he also denied having talked to them at all. At that statement, he was asked if he would be willing to face trial according to law in the courts. Robert Clark said that he would. He was then allowed to pray, and his prayer included forgiveness for the lynch mob's mistake and his own indiscretions. He concluded his words by asking the mob not to mutilate his body or riddle it with bullets. That request, exhibiting his familiarity with the usual lynching process of cutting of body parts for souvenirs, burning, or using the hanging corpse as target practice. He was then lifted up by several men while the chain was attached to a chestnut tree by a young man. The makeshift noose failed to hold as his body hung and fell several times. Eventually, the murderers succeeded in their efforts. A citizen of Georgia placed a note on the hanging body stating that no one should remove it until 5 p.m. At some point during the lynching, a black man in the crowd stated that if the people of his race had stuck together, Clark wouldn't have died. Immediately, several pistols were produced and were placed toward the speaker's face with the threat of lynching him as well.
He should have been saying that to his people instead of saying that to those Caucasian men. He should have went to our brothers and sisters and said that to them. And perhaps the brother will be alive.
By 1:15 p.m., Robert Clark's body had stopped convulsing. The coroner's jury determined that the death was committed by persons unknown, leaving an intense feeling among the city's black population. Being that the abduction and murder of Mr. Clark occurred in the middle of the day, it was immediately clear who the ringleaders of the actions were. Charles Davis, Nick Detter, Fleming Luttrell, Frank Nave, and Stephen Collins. After a week-long grand jury session, these men were indicted by the city of Bristol, Virginia, on June 19, 1891, for having with force and arms in and upon the body of Robert Clark, feloniously, willfully, deliberately, premeditatedly, and of malice and aforethought, make an assault, and with certain trace chains in their hands did put and fasten around the neck of said Robert Clark, and then and there did hang him to a tree, of which said hanging by neck he there instantly died. Thus did they murder against the peace and dignity of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Legal proceedings against the main perpetrators continued months after the fact, with the arrest of Charles Davis, the 18-year-old who had fastened the chain-made noose to the chestnut tree. Davis was released on a $500 bond signed by several prominent citizens. The 4 others indicted in the atrocity were never arrested. Though indictments were issued, it was publicly assumed no one would be
Indicted but not arrested. Wow.
held accountable for Robert Clark's murder. It was noted in the Shenandoah Herald that the same class of people protesting the lynching publicly also supported the actions of the lynch mob. The Bristol, Virginia bar expressed some interest in passing resolutions addressing the lynching, but also voiced concerns that local papers would not publish it. In 1892, journalist Ida B. Wells reflected on the proliferation of lynchings throughout the United States at the time, expressing the opinion,
"That old threadbare lie that Negro men rape white women. If Southern men aren't careful, a conclusion might be reached which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women. This idea of rape and even criminal behavior is not so much connected to lynching, but that lynching was a means to keep blacks down who were very economically competitive at this point."
Some 100.
Exactly. When we became economically competitive and we were winning and we were prospering, this was the reason why the lynch mobs. As a matter of fact, that is that was the founding of the Ku Klux Klan. They started the Klan to make us scared of doing what we were doing as far as us building towns and founding towns and basically pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. The Klan was a fear-mongering group who tried to instill fear in our people for merely handling our business, prospering, and being economically competitive with them.
130 years later, it's doubtful we will ever really know if Robert Clark raped Mary Johnson Warren, if he died for the crimes of another person, or if Mrs. Warren had simply been discovered in a consensual extramarital affair with a black man. We do know that Robert Clark was not given the right of a full and fair trial, and that he was killed at the hands of a lynch mob on the afternoon in June 1891.
After black people were freed from slavery, they were never treated as equal.
It's not the one I wanted to show. I'm trying to find.
In today's show with a new report on the history of lynchings in the United States and their legacy today. After 5 years of exhaustion.
This is the video I wanted to show.
The bodies of Robert Fuller and Malcolm Harsh were discovered hanging from trees in 2 public venues, 10 days and 50 miles apart, though police say neither death appears to be connected or shows any indication of foul play. Tonight, their shocking deaths are leading to calls for the state attorney general to investigate.
We've been hearing one thing, then we hear another, and we just want to know the truth.
24-year-old Robert Fuller's body was discovered hanging from a tree in a park near Palmdale City Hall. The LA County Sheriff's Office first saying the scene appeared to be a suicide, then today deferring the official cause of death. Investigators will now examine the rope and knot to see how it was tied.
And it is our interest to make sure that we leave no rock unturned.
Now, this dude, Alex Villanueva, at the time was LA County Sheriff, and he led one of the most racist police departments in the United States, LAPD. Alex Villanueva was supposed to investigate a gang that's predominantly white Hispanics in LA. They were terrorizing our people. And they were organized to the point where they even had matching tattoos. And the name of their police department gang was the Executioners, because that's what they actually did to our people. They either had to really harm one of us severely or kill one of us as a initiation to get into the Executioners and LAPD. But he said he's not going to let one rock go unturned for a lynching of a brother. I beg to differ.
It comes as protesters demand an independent probe and a homicide investigation.
We want truth. We want answers. We demand answers now.
When authorities found Malcolm Harsh's body hanging near a local library and homeless encampment in Victorville, they indicated no signs of foul play. The cause of death still pending, but Harsh's family says this was not a suicide.
I couldn't believe it because I had talked to him a few nights before, and we had made plans to see each other.
The Harsh family also noted the current racial tension and protest in this country, adding the death of a black man found hanging from a tree does not sit well or make sense.
Tonight, California's Attorney General and the FBI getting involved, looking into the death of two black men, raising questions across the country. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out.
This is 2024.
Suicidal?
This goes on.
Ready to leave his mother? No. Nope. A mother knows her child.
That's why Melissa McInnes wants St. Louis County Police to dig deeper into her son's death.
He was not suicidal.
On October 17th, she found Danye hanging from this tree in their backyard with bruises on his face. And this is her post that's been shared across America.
He was in good spirits.
McKinnon says the 24-year-old wasn't depressed and was starting a real estate business. She believes there's more to this story.
He said somebody took my son.
McInnes, a prominent Ferguson activist, told me she thinks her family is being targeted. In the last 2 months, she says they've been getting death threats through social media, and those threats recently showed up at her doorstep.
They watched my house, and when my husband and my son would approach the car, they would drive off.
I asked her how she could link these threats to her involvement in Ferguson. She would not go into detail tonight. She also told me she never reported these threats to police. And I asked why not.
Because we felt like we had this, you know.
The St. Louis County coroner says Danye's autopsy won't be ready for weeks, and they will not give News 4 any preliminary reports.
It's my baby. It hurts.
St. Louis County Police told us for now this remains a suicide investigation.
Saying that he committed suicide?
It remains a suicide investigation, not a homicide investigation. It should be a homicide investigation until they determine it was a suicide or anything else. But before then, it should be a homicide investigation. Cops all over the United States are crooked everywhere.
now. You're going to respect him.
And found hanging from a tree. Investigation underway. Put it up full mast. This happened in North Georgia. Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, is still waiting on the autopsy results for 29-year-old Trevante Schubert Hilton. Mr. Hilton, whose body was found hanging from a tree last week in North Georgia, is a hiker, found the body on the trail not far from High Shoals Falls in the Swallow Creek Wildlife Management Area. This took place on the 21st of this month after the hiker reported the discovery to the town's county sheriff. Local authorities, as well as the Georgia Natural Department of Resources, called the GBI to assist in the investigation. In a press release, GBI investigators stated that Mr. Hilton's death appears to be an isolated incident based on a preliminary investigation. State authorities also said Mr. Hilton was by himself at the wildlife management area. GBI spokesperson Kimberly Williams told Atlanta Black Star that state authorities were requested to investigate Mr. Hilton's death since his body was found on state property. Williams stated no additional information was available to release at this time, but said the autopsy report is pending completion. The investigation remains ongoing. Until Hilton's investigation is completed, there is no way to truly know. But what we do know is Georgia has a rich history of lynching Black folks in the state. According to the New Georgia Encyclopedia, Georgia has a total of 458 reported lynchings, only exceeded by Mississippi, 538. During the 1880s and 1890s, instances of lethal mob violence increased steadily, peaking in 1899, when 27 Georgians fell victim to lynch mobs. Between 1890 and 1900, Georgia averaged more than one mob killing per month. Now, I want you to understand a mob killing. These are citizens typically, sometimes sprinkled with members of law enforcement, and they just simply kill somebody. And they go home and they eat dinner. Okay, so understand the context of a mob lynching or mob killing, all right? The frequency of mob violence declined somewhat in the first decade of the 20th century, but by 9/11, lynch mobs were active again, killing 19 Georgians. Of the Georgians who were victims of the lynch mobs, 95% were Black. But Georgia's lynch violence was almost always perpetuated by white mobs looking to kill Black men. And the 5% who were not Black were supporting Black people, okay? All right, now, Jordan, this is a hell of a thing. And actually, we've reported on stories like this before out of Georgia where no conclusion was found except for the fact that a Black man was hanging from a tree. This is not the first time. This is probably one of the most national, but this is not the first time in the last 5 years this has happened in Georgia. What say you?
It's tragic. It's absolutely horrific. You know, as you wait for details, it's weird. It's you hope it's not a lynching, but then would it be a suicide? It's kind of like you're in a really difficult.
The police always try to rule it a suicide because they don't think that people are going to hold them accountable for doing a real investigation when they find somebody hanging from a tree. Ruling it a suicide automatically just makes law enforcement look like they're up to something and like they're covering something up.
Situation as you try to parse this story, but no matter what, the outcome is tragic. So I feel terrible for his family and his loved ones. I hope they could find solace or, God forbid, justice soon. But this is heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. It's just very, very young, and you hate to see that.
We're going to stay on top of it. We want.
Now, this next video is the last video of a
Let him go, please. Let him go. Please let him go. We're going to as soon as you let him go.
Look at this now. This is a man being pinned to a tree, a brother being pinned to a tree, and they was attempting to lynch him in Indiana.
I'm going to.
I'm John Hamilton. I'm the mayor of Bloomington, Indiana. Sunday night, I saw videos on social media that showed a member of my community, somebody I know, experiencing just horrific violence, attacks, terrifying to watch, no doubt 100 times worse to be in, terrible racial epithets, conflict, really angering me, also infuriating me. I learned through the video and then subsequent activities that there'd been a conflict not in my city, but near my city at a lake in a state-controlled area of this kind of awful racial hatred erupting.
That's what you get.
I do know Vox Booker. I've been mayor for 5 years, and I've probably known him for 5 years, and he's been a very active member of the community. I care a great deal, and I want to help my residents have justice, and of course, we want to stop this kind of thing from ever happening. It's a terrible reminder that racism, we're a very progressive city, democratic city, progressive, liberal. We believe in inclusion, but in our community, we know we have hate incidents every year. We know there's racism in our community and around our community, and we can't pretend that's not the case. I don't know what would have happened in the woods around Lake Monroe if there hadn't been other individuals there, if there hadn't been a video taken. We pray that any terrible episode, horrific interaction like this ends at least with as little violence as possible. There was obviously violence, but I don't know what would have happened.
Now, a young brother was
Also, Black Lives Matter, Morristown is at your office.
a young brother was from New Jersey, Morristown, New Jersey. He was a advocate for children. He were actually busting pedophiles when they tried to solicit sex from children. And he, that's what he did. And he was found hanging in Morristown, New Jersey. And the Attorney General is speaking about bringing justice to this young brother's family for, his hanging.
To take over the investigation of the hanging death of Amani Kildea.
Yep.
What's your response on that?
My response is that, right now, we're working with the Morris County Prosecutor's Office. We're supporting his investigation, and we're working in close coordination with them. This is a very, very tragic case, and it's particularly tragic given it's a young person. And then I understand in the national climate how there's a demand for quick resolution, but what we're trying to do is work with the prosecutor to do a complete, thorough investigation, and when we have something to share, we'll share that publicly.
How do you decide when it's a matter for the state versus the local?
Well, some matters come to us automatically by operation of law. If it's a death resulting from an officer an encounter with law enforcement, so by statute that comes directly to our office. In prior cases, that was handled at the local level, but we have 21 county prosecutors who are chief law enforcement officers in their counties. They do great work, and they have a process by which they resolve conflicts. We have an oversight function as the Attorney General's office. In many cases, we work in close coordination and offer our resources to all of our local county prosecutors, in this case as well as in other cases.
So do you have confidence in the Morris County Prosecutor's Office to conduct this fairly? Black Lives Matter has raised some question.
I do. I do because we're working in close coordination with them and Prosecutor Knapp is Chief Law Enforcement Officer in the county, and he's conducting a thorough investigation, and we're supporting that investigation where needed.
I want to thank everyone for joining me this evening. I wanted to bring awareness to what's going on. While politicians is telling us to just give our votes to people, neither candidate is stressing a policy that deals with what affect us. They can be real specific when it comes to others, but when it comes to policies that could potentially help our people, it's always a trick bag. It's always some type of big umbrella where others are included, but they're real specific when it comes to other people. No, we want something specific, inclusive for us, exclusive for us, as a matter of fact, not inclusive. That's the problem with inclusiveness. That's a big problem. We want something exclusive for our people. Because when it comes to others, people have gotten laws passed on their behalf based on a sexuality. Can you imagine that? People have gotten laws passed on their behalf based on a sexuality. And we can't get laws passed on our behalf because people are doing us harm. They pussyfoot around when it comes to us being harmed. And they'll pass a law that include everybody else. It's like every time a law is passed, they always use, now it may start off, it's like they do in the magazines. It may start off black, but once it go down the page, it always end up black. Then you see people of color under black. And then down at the bottom, you'll see minorities. And automatically that cut us out. We don't even get crumbs in that deal. And when we ask a question specifically about our people, somebody who wants something from us can't give us an answer. And we're supposed to accept that. We're supposed to accept that and choose this person, left or right. We're supposed to choose either one of them when neither one of them have answers for us. I got an answer. It's we do it ourselves. That's the answer. We do it ourselves. Whatever we don't want around us, we should drive it away. Whatever we want, we bring it. But we can't depend on nobody to be benevolent towards us. It's not going to happen. Anybody telling you that is your enemy. I don't care if you look in the mirror and you're talking that, you're your own damn enemy. If you're thinking that, you're your own enemy. If you're thinking that about yourself, there's no benevolent person coming to save us. We have to do that for ourselves. I want to thank my brother Big Dog Philly OG. Salute to you. Salute to David M. Salute to P. Moses. Salute to Hawkeye. Salute to Prophet Levi. Salute to Black Wild Indian. Salute to Dre Cobb's music. Salute to my brother Epic Studies. Salute to Warfare K. Respect to my sister, True Daughter of Darkness. Salute to P. Moses. Salute to my comrade Talk You Talk Media. Respect to Black Panther Jackie Brown. Peace to my good brother Ghetto Child Clinic. I thank you all for joining me this evening. I appreciate it. I just want to bring some enlightenment and some awareness to our people because we are in an election season and people are trying to get us to commit an act of treason towards ourselves. That's an act of treason. When somebody tell you that somebody died for you to have the right to vote, that's just it's just to have you feeling guilty because you think somebody died to give you a right. You have a right to not vote. The right to vote means if you don't want to vote, you don't have to vote. If nobody is interesting you as far as a candidate, they're not supposed to tell you. Anybody telling you you got to choose between two people that you're not sure will do anything for you or support any interest of yours, that's an act of treason. Telling you you have to choose the less of two evils. That's nonsense. We need to start realizing and recognizing who our enemies are, foreign and domestic. Because everybody look like us is not our friends. They're not our, our family. They're not. Some of them are foes. Acting like they have your best interest, but they don't have your best interest. They don't. They're only thinking about themselves. I want to see the day when if I know one of them, of course, is going to be elected, but to those who support either candidate, the jackass or the elephant, you will be told to scram and they're doing nothing for you because nothing's going to change. That's always been the way it was when it comes to a politician and our people. They're so used to us being the sucker in politics, the sucker faller for what politics tell us, and then using people as a liaison to get us to engage in foolishness. Entertainers in all genres of entertainer, whether it's an athlete, a somebody in Hollywood, or a somebody in performing arts. It's always they send somebody to us as an entertainer because that's what they see us as. We're merely the entertainment. Either we are the servants or we're the entertainment. That's how they see us. Because that's how they pander to us. How a person pandered to you is that's what they see you as. So we need to understand that. Because it's not a play day. Things are happening, and we need to be focused on that. And until we do like other people and say what you're going to do for us, and then when they start backpedaling, so you know what, our people not even engaging into everybody staying home this election season, because if you go to all these different communities, Jewish people want something for their vote. Rednecks want something for their votes. Asians want something for their votes. You name the people, Italians, Irish, you name the people, they want something for their votes and they get it. We're the only ones who don't ask for a damn thing for our votes. And then they get people to tell us that we're not supposed to ask for anything for our votes. We're always the suckers. and they don't come around until they want something from us. And let me tell you, a fair exchange, there's no robbery in a fair exchange. You give me something for something. That's a fair exchange. If I'm giving you something, you're giving me nothing, somebody got robbed. Period. Somebody got robbed. And we get robbed every election season. Our people get robbed. Somebody tell you they're not going to do nothing for you, and somebody use another candidate as a litmus test. If you don't know whether or not you should vote for me or Trump, you ain't black. That's a litmus test. A white man get to tell us what black is and what black is not based on whether or not you vote for him or the other candidate. That's insulting. That's insulting. And we need to tell every candidate when they come to us to go to hell until they got something for us. They should be coming to us with something. We shouldn't be asking them nothing. They should be coming to us, we got this for you. They should be coming with offerings, not us asking them. They should be coming with offerings for our vote. Thank all the family for coming through and hanging out with your brother this evening. This is The Enemy's Public. I am Bro.Nasir. Like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section. Until next time, peace.